Outriders is just around the corner, and when we start out on Enoch, we're going to have the choice of 4 main classes. So today, I'm going to be looking at the Trickster class and the reasons why you should jump in and take advantage of being a Trickster. So the following is a showcase of the Trickster, including skills, class trees, and also build examples. And if you're new around here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below for all the latest Outriders content and turn notifications while hitting that bell. So first of all, we are going to try and attempt to answer the question, what is the Trickster? The Trickster is a close range class that's fast and can easily hit and run on targets. So Tricksters can use their abilities to slow down and paralyze enemies and even teleport behind their foes and infuse ammo with the powers of the anomaly. Tricksters have been designed like a typical rogue class, so they can get in there up close and personal to their opponents, deal huge damage and then get out back to safety. One skill tree does take them down a tanky style of gameplay, but as well as that they do have the option to interrupt enemies with their abilities, slowing things down for teammates and allowing fellow Outriders to control the battlefield. Next up, let's have a look at the melee skill, so deal damage and inflict slow to all enemies. So the melee skill does not require a skill slot nor any class points. Sprinting before using the melee skill changes to a ground slam that appears to have a larger area of effect, but also has a longer cooldown. And the base cooldown is about 1 second, and sprinting melee skill is about 2 seconds. However, each subsequent use of the melee skill increases the cooldown, even between abilities and weapon fire. Well, next up, let's have a look at the healing mechanic, and each of the Outriders does have a way to heal. So, with the Trickster, each enemy killed in close range heals you and grants a portion of shield. So you want to be in there close range and killing enemies to help make sure you're healing and getting your shields back. Next up, let's have a look at the class traits of the Trickster. So by default, you receive an additional 5% maximum health. The active shield grants 5% damage mitigation, and every close range kill heals you by 20% of your maximum health and grants you a 12% shield. Well, next up, let's have a look at the skills of the Trickster. So each class has 8 skills, but you can only equip 3 of them at a time, and different combination of skills can be combined with weapons and armor to create very devastating builds. So first of all, we've got Temporal Blade. This is of type damage and interrupt, so you can paralyze and slice enemies in front of you, dealing damage and inflicting slow and interrupt on all targets. You've also got Slow Trap, so this one is a deception type. So you create a space-time anomaly that inflicts slow onto enemies and projectiles for 10 seconds. Next up, we've got Hunt the Prey, and this is a movement type. So you select an enemy and teleport behind them and you receive a shield bonus. Then we've got Twisted Rounds, and this one is a damage type. So fill your weapons magazine with anomaly infused bullets that deal significantly more damage to enemies, and the skill lasts until you reload or switch weapons. Then we've got Cyclone Slice. This one is of type damage and interrupt. You can create a whirlwind of anomaly blades that deal damage and interrupt onto enemies within a small radius of you with every hit, and the skill lasts for 5 seconds. Next up, we've got Borrowed Time. This is a movement type, and you receive a shield and mark your location for 28 seconds. So triggering the skill again will bend space-time and teleport you back to the marked spot. Next, we've got Venator's Knife, and this is a deception type. So you can throw a temporal knife at an enemy, and the blade will ricochet between a maximum of 5 enemies within a small radius, dealing damage and marking them. And all marked targets will be inflicted with slow, and for 10 seconds, the first damage dealt by you will be doubled. And finally, we've got Time Rift. This is a deception and interrupt type, so you create a shockwave that suspends enemies in the air, leaving them unable to fight for 3.5 seconds and inflicts weakness, and this one has a 10-second cooldown. So those are all the skills for the Trickster, but next up let's have a look at the class trees. So there's 3 main paths in the Trickster's skill tree. You've got Assassin, Reaver and Harbinger. So in the demo we've only had a few class points available for upgrades, but in the main game we're going to be able to unlock new skills and abilities on one of these trees. So early on in the skill trees they do overlap a little bit, but later on things can get quite specific, so it's best to test things out, see what fits your playstyle, and then pick one of the trees. For the Assassin, this one is focused on boosting your weapon damage and increases crit damage. The Harbinger feels slightly more like a tank, as your health and shield regeneration is priority. And then the Reaver, that one focuses on increasing your anomaly power and buffs abilities like resistance piercing, weakness and skill leech. Well, that is a little bit about the Trickster, but next up we're going to have a look at some example builds. And currently there are a couple of ways to play the Trickster. There's an all-out aggressive build, which is good for solo players, or you can focus on a support or team-orientated build. So first of all, let's have a look at the damage build. This one is all about dishing out that high damage and using twisted rounds as your main skill. So Hunt the Prey and Temporal Blade are going to be used as the secondary and tertiary skills, allowing you to get in there up close and personal with your enemies. And shotguns work really well with this build, and if you've got the right weapon mods, you can inflict vulnerability on your enemies, which helps increase the damage output by an additional 25%. So looking at the skills, we've got Twisted Rounds, and Twisted Rounds is the focus of the build, and it's going to allow you to deal much more damage to enemies with anomaly-infused bullets. Next up, we've got Hunt the Prey, and this one is a useful skill, allowing you to select an enemy and teleport behind them, plus you get a shield too, so that's really good for that close quarters combat. And then finally, we're going to be using Temporal Blade. This allows you to deal damage, slow and interrupt enemies, effectively controlling your opponents where you need to. So looking at the weapons, shotguns are pretty good, and any shotgun is probably going to work in this build. If you have a legendary shotgun, then great. If not, look for shotguns that inflict vulnerability. But if you haven't got any of these, just look for mods that are going to work with this damage increasing build, and then just work with what you have. But if you can get a shotgun, I would try that out on this build. Next, you can use an SMG, and SMGs are really good on the build, especially if you've got one that comes with bleed. The Migraine is a really good weapon, and if you've had a little bit of luck and got this to drop, and you've got that available, then try this out in the build. Well, next up, let's have a look at the armor mods. So additional mag is first up, and this mod helps make Twisted Round last for 2 magazines instead of 1, and that is going to really help you melt through enemies. Then we've got Strong Twist, so 15% extra damage while Twisted Rounds is active. Next up, we've got Slasher, so you can use Temporal Slice twice before that goes into a cooldown instead of once. And then we've got Radiation Jump, so Hunt the Prey is going to inflict targets with vulnerability, causing them to take 25% increased damage. And finally, we're using Dance with Death, so 20% shorter cooldown on Hunt the Prey. Well, that is the damage build, and do let me know down in the comments what you think and how we could improve this build. But do bear in mind, this build is based on the demo, and once the full game opens up, we're really going to be able to iterate on this and create extra damage builds. Well, next up, let's have a look at the support build. So those not deciding to fly solo may want to try out a support build with the Trickster. So rather than increase solo damage, Tricksters are also pretty effective at helping out on the battlefield, slowing down enemies, often while maintaining a shield, which is going to make you much harder to kill. So Slow Sphere and Temporal Blades are going to be the two main skills here in this build, allowing you to effectively slow down enemies and then slice them up when they're stationary. So looking at the skills, we've got Slow Trap. You deploy a sphere around you, slowing all nearby enemies and projectiles, and this one is a really effective crowd control tool, allowing you to go in there, deploy the Slow Trap, and then dance around your enemies, ideally taking them out with a shotgun. Next up, we've got Temporal Blade, and this one allows you to deal damage, slow and interrupt enemies, effectively controlling your opponents where you need to. And finally, we've got Twisted Rounds, so the final skill for the build, Twisted Rounds for the damage increase, and it's a really, really great skill and almost a must-have on any Trickster build. So looking at the weapons, so try to equip a weapon with Shield Maiden mod on it. This is going to help regenerate your shields very, very fast indeed. Then a sniper rifle is really good on this build, so given the amount of crowd control ability you're going to be using, then shooting enemies in the head is going to be so easy. Finally, let's have a look at the armor mods. So damage mitigation, allies inside your slow trap take 20% less damage. So Thunderdome, receive 100% shield when slow trap ends. We've got double stop, Temporal Blade's paralysis effect lasts 100% longer. Then we've got Slasher, so Temporal Slice can be used an additional time before it enters cooldown. That one is really, really handy. And finally, we're using Twisted Fate, so Twisted Rounds increase your crit damage by 30% while it's active. So those there are a couple of example builds with the Trickster, but let me know down in the comments what you think of the Trickster and let me know what class you're going to be choosing when you start Outriders coming up this Thursday. Well, that is it for the Trickster Showcase, including the skills, class trees and build examples. And as always, thank you so much for watching. For more Outriders content like this, hit that subscribe button down below and subscribe to This Week in Video Games. If you want to join the community, check out the Discord link in the description, or you can follow me on Twitter at TWIVG Podcast. If you enjoyed this video or found it useful, liking and sharing it would really help me out. Otherwise, check out the other videos on the channel. Thanks again. I'll see you soon.